the best thing that any leader can do is just step out the room, do that in a really collaborative, open, engaging. The best ideas come from the team.
You lived in Athelston, but worked in London. Tell us how that worked.
Yeah, it was hard, right? I mean, I was on the global executive team, and I was responsible for 28 countries in total.
The better leaders, the more successful leaders, are the ones who are curious about people. They care about people and they engage with people. All right, Millie, we talked about professional CEOs. We've got one in front of us. Adam, welcome. Adam has got an impressive executive career spanning 25 years across retail, finance, tourism, technology, and entered the world of digital fitness in 2017 with Sweat as the Chief Operating Officer, took over as the Chief Executive Officer in 2022, took that over from co-founder Toby Pearce. You've got extensive experience in managing large multinational businesses, and you've guided Sweat through an acquisition and then an unacquisition. We'll explore a little bit about what that is. You've worked closely with co-founder and personal trainer powerhouse Kayla to grow the world's largest female fitness community beyond 50 million followers.
Yep.
It's just amazing. You've been a professional executive for a very long time. And when I refer to as a professional, as opposed to an entrepreneur or a founder or, some of those crazy people like I've been from time to time as well, you've been a professional executive for a really long time. When did you know that's the pathway you were going to take?
Yeah. The emphasis on a really long time, so I'm assuming you're referring to my age. Thanks for making that.
Not as long as me.
No, look, it evolved over time. I think that from a young age, I played a lot of sport. I think sport's a great basis and foundation for, teamwork and collaborating and, so on and so forth. And at a young age, I was probably never really content to sit back and follow. Just wasn't in my nature. So on that basis, I felt more comfortable with leading. And I think leading started to demonstrate opportunities for me very early on when I was first came to Adelaide, studying at university, playing football for Norwood, then some part-time work in a CD store, DVD store, just due to the fact I had a passion for music. And part of what I was doing at the time was obviously DJing to put myself through uni and pay some bills. But the overlap was that it led to some work in Sanity Music, which
Sanity
is
on a parade.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and there was at that point when CD and DVD sales were big, the 220, 230 odd retail stores nationally. It was a big music chain, the biggest in Australia at that time. And I think just the pathway sort of opened up over a period of sort of 2 or 3 years from sort of part-time or casual through to full-time, through to manager, through to area manager, state manager, national manager, and so on over a period of years. And in many respects sort of fell into senior leadership just by default of the fact that people that were above me at the time, it either didn't work for whatever reason, opportunities, and I'm like putting my hand up and love a challenge. And when given a challenge in some of those senior roles, and if you perform, generally you get the opportunity to continue to progress. And that's really how that sort of happened. And, I've always lent really heavily on my ability to manage people and work with people really well. I'm not a manager or a leader that's ever lent heavily on title or hierarchy. In fact, if anything, I think that gets in the road. And it's been proven to be sort of successful across, as you say, a really long time.
Jeez, don't take that personally. Tell me, what was your first job?
The first paid job was picking oranges in the fruit block. I mean, that's where I grew up in the Riverland. I spent the first 17 or 18 years in a town with about 150 people.
Wow.
Before I came to Adelaide. So it was a big move to come down here. And Mum and Dad had the 30-odd acres of citrus. So, in the country, when you've got a citrus orchard, you work every weekend. You pick oranges and you're up there and, out there at 5:30, 6 in the morning, and you pick until lunchtime until it's 30 or 40 degrees, and then that's your day.
So did you come to Adelaide for uni or for footy?
Both.
So what did you study?
Bachelor of Mathematical and Computer Science, double major, pure mathematics and statistics.
Very impressive.
Yeah, good fun.
Yeah. And how long did you play footy for?
Through until, so I came down and played 2 years with Nord.
Yeah.
And then in the second year, broke my hand and my foot in that season.
Mm-hmm.
So I missed the last 3 or 4 games. Went out for pre-season the following year with the seniors team. Didn't get along with the senior coach. I won't mention his name, but he's ended up being a Crows coach, which was somewhat limiting as far as my football path went. Then I ended up out at Payneham and played amateur league as the captain of the A-grade team out there.
Yeah, and now you're still involved with Payneham.
I am, yeah, and so's my wife. I mean, Angela's the junior coordinator at Payneham. A lot of responsibility, and I coach a couple of footy teams out there.
Yeah, excellent. We met because we used to live across from each other, across the road from each other. But you had this amazing job then when I first met you, where you lived in Athelston but worked in London.
Correct.
Tell me how on earth, and you're a really family-oriented, home-oriented guy with a job in London. Most listeners would be like, particularly any based in South Australia, would be going, wait, what? You worked in London but lived in Athelston. Tell us how that worked.
Yeah, it was hard, right? I mean, I was on the global executive team and I was responsible for 28 countries in total, 9,500 employees, and I managed 109 airports.
Oh my goodness.
And I had a budget at that point of around about £2 billion turnover, which I was responsible for. Now, needless to say, the global CEO at that point said, you need to move to London. You can't do this out of, whereabouts, Adelaide, and I said, look, here's how, I think this can work. I said, if you're going to ask my wife to pick up a very young family and move to the other side of the world in the absence of a support network, that each time I've got to travel, I'm assuming I'm going to be away a fair bit. I said, I don't think that's really going to work, to be honest. However, I'm prepared to stay in Adelaide where she's got an amazing support network, family and friends. And on that basis, when I travel, at least I know that she's got everyone around her that she needs if I'm overseas at the time. That was discussed at board level. I think that there was a sense of understanding that is probably best that the home life was taken care of. And they were willing to back me in what was a seriously large role, and if I was prepared to commit to travel. So every 4 weeks was London, and which is fine because that's when the monthly business reviews were, and the executive committee came together for 2-day, 3-day offsites. So I do a week in London, back to Adelaide, a week in Adelaide, and then a week in another country or countries, and back to Adelaide for a week, and then back to London.
Wow. How often did you see the kids?
Yeah, for the week I was in Adelaide.
Literally, 1 week of the month.
2 weeks in the month.
2 weeks in the month. Yep.
So, and the children were young, right? So when I really started doing the intense travel, we just had our first daughter, our daughter. And I remember very clearly that my first trip to Mumbai, she was 4 weeks old. So I'd just taken 4 weeks off after she was born. And I went to Mumbai for the first time and landed right smack bang in the middle of a terrorist attack when they took on the Taj and the Oberoi with 16 terrorists and killed 120 odd people. So I was there just down the road. So that was my first Indian experience at the time, which was difficult, but not as difficult as what it was to explain to my wife that I was going to have to go back again and again because my team were there. So throughout the next few years, the children were still very young. And it really wasn't until my son turned about 4 or 5, so this was, probably around about 2016, 17, that he started to notice that I wasn't around. And then that was it. So the decision was made straight away, irrespective of the role, and I enjoyed the position and what came with it. That was the end of that. So I resigned literally about a month after he started to say, Dad, I wish you wouldn't go. And I think he was about 4.
Yeah.
And that was a big call because they didn't want you to go. You were very well respected by the business and the chair at that time. Before we move to what you did next, if you're a young, ambitious person living in Adelaide, let's just go back to how does a young, ambitious, degree qualified person in Adelaide land a global job like you did?
Yeah.
How does that happen?
Yeah.
You've got to, I think it comes down to performance. At the end of the day, it comes down to performance. So when I took on and progressed through area management, estate management and those types of things.
This was Sanity.
This was Sanity. You know, each one of those areas that I had or the state that I had was, you know, the best performing in the country. So that gets recognised, right? Well, you must be doing something that's working. And then, of course, those that are making the decisions are like, well, we wouldn't mind you taking on a larger responsibility if you can do that, you know, and deliver that sort of performance. But at a broader part of the business, then those opportunities came up. So New South Wales came up. So they just said, do you want to come across to Sydney and run the Eastern Seaboard? I'm like, yeah, why not? So picked up, went to Sydney, did that for a year or so. And then the national retail manager left. And they just said, well, do you want to do that? I said, well, why not? You know, 220, 230 odd stores. So I did that. And then...
How old were you then?
I think I'd moved there when I was 32. So that was my 5th year with that business at the time. So I'd gone from casual to national retail manager in 5 years. And then when the senior people that left Sanity at that point went to another company called Travelex, it was only a few months after that I got the phone call that, hey, would you consider coming across to this business called Travelex? I had no idea what they did. To be honest, I didn't know who they were. They said, look, we sell money. So, well, that sounds not that exciting. But to me, it's never been about the what you're selling. I mean, CDs and stuff was exciting and money's not that exciting, but it's not about that. It was about the challenge of taking on larger roles and doing great things and leading a group of people and, you know, let's see where we go, right? So they brought me across around Sydney Airport at that point, which is the largest business in Australia for foreign exchange, the second largest retailer on the airport behind duty free, you know, $120, $140 million a year business. So I took that on. I think 9 months later, I got the national role, so I was running Australia, which was great. I think about 12 months after that, I was running Asia Pacific and took on Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Hong Kong. I think about 12 months later, I took on China and opened up the business in China. 12 months after that, I took on India, opened up the business in India, and then Malaysia. So I had 7 countries all up over that sort of 2 or 3 year period. And then again, you know, if you're performing and you can demonstrate that what you're doing is working across all aspects, not just fiscal, but every area of operation and the processes and the you know, the standardising and just the efficiencies you create by running things well. I think that was noticed by the global CEO who visited the region on a number of occasions and was comparing it against the other countries around the world. And, you know, he said, look, I wouldn't mind you having a look at the rest of the world and seeing if you think there's any efficiencies to be gained. So I went on a secondment for 9 months and visited every country and came back to then the executive committee and presented what I thought was the way to go, which is pretty daunting. I mean, these are hard things to do, right? But you've got to back yourself in, I guess. And he thought that was good, and he removed the executive committee and replaced the regional divisional directors with a global head, and I got that role.
It's amazing, isn't it, when you think and you have the confidence to know that you can perform.
I think there's a few traits that really come out so strongly from you, and that's discipline. I feel like even when you're like the orange picking, like the amount of discipline that would need to be involved, that persistence and that consistency and the loyalty. Sounds like you've been, like before you became to where you are now, like an incredible loyal employee. For
whatever reason, I think people have got certain inherent traits in them around things like, are you an overly structured person? Are you well organised? I mean, some people are one end of the spectrum, some of the others, and those are in the middle. And I think that what played in my favour was that when you're managing larger businesses, larger businesses come with a significant amount of variables, like huge amounts of variables. You can't run a Japanese business the same way you run a Middle Eastern business. It just doesn't work, right? So you've got variables everywhere. And I think if you can understand where to be able to apply process to the point where you drive more systemic behaviour, and if you're attempting to run that sort of volume, but you're running in a really consistent manner, it becomes way easier to manage. And that's what we did. We just standardised things like, the selling model globally. Like when I took over the 28 countries, there was like 6 or 8 different ways around the world where we were teaching, 9,000 employees to sell. Well, that doesn't work because consumers, particularly in that industry, are hopping from airport to airport and are basing buying decisions on the consistency of the service they're getting, which is why airports have retailers like Starbucks, McDonald's, Hungry Jack's, whatever, because consumers land in a foreign country and go, the brand signifies trust. So I know what I'm going to get, doesn't matter where I go. And we applied the same philosophy. So if you land in JFK and then you head across to Heathrow, you want to be served the same way, same availability of currency, for example, the same promotional, the same branding, the same positioning, the same store layouts, the same. And if you can deliver that, you give yourself a better chance of getting improved strike rates on airports, which is what it was all about, higher percentage of paying customers per pax.
Is that a theme from Sanity through to Travelex? You've got a capacity to acquire a lot of information and process it and then think about execution. Often, I was in a meeting earlier today where, the weakness in the whole process was they were going, the challenge is execution. I was like, dude, that's the whole thing is execution. But you've had a performance mindset from footy, as Millie said, and the ability to process a lot of information and then turn it into process. There are loads of people in Big Four consulting firms, for example, who are masters at process. But at the end of the day, humans find ways to screw up process. How have you, so you've got a really good handle on process and a good handle on discipline, but at the end of the day, you've been successful because people have engaged in your processes, right? How have you managed to have humans not screw up your process?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because in order to get someone to engage in something, I've always had this compliance versus commitment argument that I've had as a philosophy of mine for a really long time, and for me, that's very much around if you are an autocratic leader and you believe that you are right and you are going to drive a particular process and you expect people to comply with that process, you'll probably get compliance. It doesn't mean they're committed to it, which means that within a very short period of time, you turn your back on that process for a second and then revisit it and find out that there's a deviation from what it is that you first thought you were driving. But if you take people on the journey to the point where they've felt like they've been heard, respected, had input, ability to influence, bought into the process and are fully engaged, well, then you get commitment. And that's completely different. That's what we did. So to give you an example, when I did the 12-month secondment to look at the various operations around the world for the 28 countries, and I reported back to the global CEO, he said to me, all right, he said, well, now how do we get it into the business? I said, hang on a second. I said, that wasn't part of the brief, right? I said, you just wanted a snapshot of what could be improved. He said, well, now I'm tasking you with changing it. And I said, okay, well, none of these people report to me. I said, I don't have any authority. I'm currently on secondment. I've got divisional directors that are not going to buy into this, I can tell you. So he said, well, you come back to me in a few weeks and you tell me what you need. So I went away and I'm like, okay, well, that's the goalpost shifted, right? So you've got to adapt your thinking. So I took the top 80 managers from around the world and I said to the global CEO, if you want me to actually do this, I said, I'm going to need a budget to put them in a room for a few days and take them through what we're trying to achieve. And he said, done.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you put 80 managers into Dubai for 4 days. That's not a cheap exercise. And they all flew in, which they thought was great because it was probably initially viewed as a bit of a get away and have a holiday. And, the first morning of that, I remember very clearly standing out the front explaining some of the findings. There was a lot of folded arms around the room, et cetera, et cetera. But I outlined the benefits to those in the room for attempting to create a consistent way of showing up to our consumers. And I was fortunate because at each round table you had JFK sitting next to Heathrow, and then you had Charles de Gaulle sitting next to Zaventine or Istanbul or whatever it might be. And I said, just look at the person to your left for a second and realise that the performance of your business is actually 100% reliant on the performance of their business. Because if someone's just left Heathrow flying to JFK and they've had a terrible experience at Heathrow, I said, what do you reckon the chances are they'll transact with you in JFK? It's a zero, right? I said, because the brand has already been damaged. So I said, if we don't sort of come together and agree a way forward, I said, then we're limiting our opportunity to perform, and we're all here to do, to achieve. So it was interesting. I had a particular, and the first objective of the day was to get a standardised selling process, as I said, which was all over the place. And I already had in my mind a preconceived, this is the way it's going to go, right? I want this acronym, I want these objectives, this is and I was absolutely certain how it was going to go. Within about 45 minutes of the discussion as a group, it just went in completely the opposite direction. And I found myself sitting at the back of the room, spectating, got myself a chair, and I watched 80 of the most senior managers in our business sit there for 3 or 4 hours and create their own selling plan and selling model. And they were high-fiving and there was cheering. What do? You say, well done, right? And it landed to the point where they went away and they were committed to it. I mean, I can't physically be in 28 countries. You've got to trust the fact that they're engaged to the point where you've got commitment, not compliance.
Because if you say it, people tend to doubt it. But if they say it, it must be right.
They bought in.
Yeah.
They bought in.
So clearly you demonstrated humility. You had a very clear view, but you didn't get locked into it. You were prepared to let it run and maybe land somewhere else. That takes a sense of humility and a sense of awareness. But you and I have talked about this as well. The craft of delegating well as opposed to abrogating or just expecting. You in that environment gave clear instructions on an outcome but didn't get really caught up in a process. Where did you learn that from? Did you see someone do that and go, I'm going to do that? Or did you learn it yourself along the way? Where did you get that from?
I think that if you are grounded in understanding that you may not have the answers to everything, I think if your starting position is that you're the single source of truth and that you are the the most intelligent person in the room, you're in the wrong room, et cetera, but that's just been for years for me. I can't remember a point in time or a person in time where I've necessarily gone, I think that's the way to go. It just has always felt right. I've never professed to be an expert. In fact, I've got 9 or 10 direct reports at the moment. Every single one of them know more about their part of the business than I do. But my job is to do exactly what you just said, to understand really clearly as a group where we're trying to go and establish direction as to what that might be and get alignment and, a sense of engagement from all of them that they're committed to where are we going, what do we want to look like in a year, 2 years, 5 years, whatever it might be. And that just establishes a set of guardrails at the end of the day. But then you can't turn around and say, not only am I going to give you the guardrails, but I'm going to tell you how you drive within those guardrails as well, because that's why pay people good money if you're just going to turn around and attempt to micromanage it. You're taking away the value of an SME being in the room.
My old chairman used to say, why buy a dog and bark yourself?
That's a great way of putting it. And it's I sat down with, I remember one of my managers at Sydney Airport one day and we were having exactly this conversation because he was really frustrated with his inability to get the team to achieve the outcome that he wanted. And we were sitting at a round table, I remember very clearly, and I took I think it was the salt shaker, and I put it in the middle. And he was sitting on the other side of the table. I said, okay. So I said, your objective, I said, is the salt shaker. I said, now, if that's the outcome you're wanting me to achieve, I said, I'm sitting over here. I said, I'm probably going to come at it from here. I said, you're probably going to come at it from there. I said, if I still achieve the salt shaker, I said, does it really matter? And he said, well, he started a debate his rationale. I said, well, this is a problem, right? Because if you just want everyone to look through the lens, your lens, and achieve it your way, then you're just getting compliance at the end of the day. They're doing what they think is the right thing to do. They're not bought into the process. And quite often when you open up as you do inevitably, open up the conversation to people feeling like they are valued and listened, the best ideas come from the team. They always come from the team. And the best thing a good CEO or, putting title aside, the best thing that any leader can do is just step out the road.
Yeah.
Establish direction and do that in a really collaborative, open, engaging, and direct way. Once you set where you want to go, like that's discipline. Let's not mess around. We're here to make money, or we're here to deliver on customer service, or we're here to deliver on efficiencies, improvements. Let's be really clear, right? Let's get that up on the board straight away. How we get there from that, you have an obligation. You are accountable.
Isn't it incredible how many managers get into management roles and senior management roles, yet cannot transition into leadership? You see them micromanaging. As an observer, you can usually hear them complaining, people don't, why won't they think? Or I've got this high staff turnover, and you think, have a look in the mirror and say, so who's making all the decisions around here? Because if you're the one making all the decisions around here, don't be surprised if no one's showing up ready to make decisions, right?
Yeah.
And then don't complain about it, because you might find it's a bit embarrassing because it's you who's the problem, right? But it happens a lot. You would have managed people like that.
Well, let's go back a step further back from that even. What's the basis by which people are promoted into leadership roles, right? I mean, normally it's because they're good at doing a particular area of the business. They could be an amazing finance manager and they just understand accounting principles really well. It could be that they've done an acquisition or mergers previously and they've landed a couple of deals. But there's a component of someone being a good leader that just continually gets overlooked. Just because you're great in your area of expertise or skills doesn't mean you can manage people. And that's what happens when you get promotions or
you got promotions because you were always performing, right?
And you've got to bring the team with you.
Yeah.
I mean, even when I was area manager of South Australia, I mean, there was 8 stores. I wasn't in those 8 stores serving customers every day. My team was, and they were doing a great job and they were smashing their budgets. So my role wasn't to get behind the counter and serve, right? Because I was good at serving. I mean, I was good at doing customer experience prior to getting to that level, but you've got to transition away, and that's no longer the value that I bring each day to the 100, 150 people that were in that area. It was very different.
Is it fair to say that the transition from being really good manager to good leadership and good delegation and all those good skills that you've got start with some value programming, there's an essence of value programming there that comes from somewhere. Where's the essence of your value programming come from? Does it?
Yeah, I've attempted to unpack this a number of times. I think that all of us that are inquisitive and curious about why we are where we are and our personality traits and so on have gone back through to try and understand the root cause of these types of questions. I think mine and where I've landed on my assessment of where I am is that I lean heavily towards wanting to please others. And I think you've got a lot of people that do fall in that category that in many respects are reliant on the opinions of other people to feel like there is a greater sense of self-worth or credibility, achievement, success, you're winning, that type of thing. And I acknowledge that I've lent in that space a lot, and lean too far that way, it's unhealthy, right? Because then you're undervaluing, what you bring to the table in the absence of needing others' opinions to make you feel valued, which is not healthy. But I think that, to be honest, that's where it started. I think that yearning to want to please, that yearning to want to win, that yearning to want to be creditable and be acknowledged and receive reassurance that you're good at what you do, you're winning, you're achieving, you're successful. These are things that early on in anyone's career, that's the motivator. You want the promotion, you want the title, you want the salary. And then as you go through your career into your 30s or your 40s, that changes because you get comfortable in your own skin. You realise you're not there to tick those boxes off. And you start to realise by way of value, like I said, the best thing you can do be really clear on the direction, get everybody aligned, and then find ways to just get out their way and let them be successful.
I'm Carolina's co-founder and head trainer on the Sweat app. Sweat is a women's only fitness app. We offer so many different training styles, from high intensity to strength, Pilates, yoga, pregnancy, post-pregnancy, meeting you where you're at. We have over 45 different programs and thousands of workouts. Start your 7-day free trial in the Sweat app now.
In my 25 years as a CEO, one of the hardest things to find was a consulting and advisory firm where they'd actually been CEOs. I created CEO Advantage to be the advisory firm I was looking for. Go to ceoadvantage.com.au and find out how we can help you and your team be the best in the business. Have you ever crashed into a boss where you've not been able to do that?
Yeah, of course.
And so therefore not brought out. I mean, you've got these amazing skills, but a bad boss can, like even someone like you who's motivated and intelligent and values driven and all of those different things, a bad boss can make all of that evaporate.
I think if you find yourself in a situation where you are choosing on a daily basis to compromise your own core values, then you've got to make a decision, right? We've all seen and met people in business that have chosen, for whatever reason, and they're welcome to make that choice, to compromise their own values on a day-to-day basis. But that's a choice you're making because you're getting something in return that you value greater than the compromise you're making. I can't do that. It's just not a position that I've ever been able to find myself in. Now, has it led to me making very difficult decisions? Absolutely. But I'm not going to stay in a situation, any relationship, where, working or otherwise, where you feel as though you're rocking up every day not being true to yourself. Why do that?
Isn't it interesting, Millie? There's two things from our conversation that have come out in Adam's conversation. One is starting with yes.
Yes.
Like every time there's a challenge, it's like, I start with yes. And then secondly, this trait of once I crash into somebody who compromises my integrity, that sense of, well, that's a shame, but this is over. And how quickly, but also how definitely that happens. Did you find that from that experience, though, that helped you frame your next leadership career? Yeah. That it was actually good for you to have a bad experience?
Absolutely. What it does is it gives you reference points. I think when you go through, I was very fortunate that, the Travelex experience was so incredibly positive. So you sort of find yourself in this space that like, well, isn't the world wonderful? The world's not wonderful, but it just happens to be your only reference point is a really positive experience. And that it should be something that everyone aspires to be involved in. But the world's not always wonderful. You're going to come across managers that are toxic or cultures that are toxic. And you've got to ask yourself, and you say, start with yes. You should even start with yes in that situation, because you should be, what can I do to influence this environment and get it to a point where, it's at a level or a standard that I would be, pleased to be, pleased to be involved in. And then you try in a whole raft of things that have worked for you in the past. And when you start realizing that that's not landing or it's not working because you are coming up against immovable objects, it's best to just go, okay, I'm not fitting here. I don't fit here. So it might be time for me to consider making a different change, and people should make that decision. We've all seen, and I use the sporting analogy sometimes, how many times do you see an elite athlete that's in a team that is not performing, moves from that team to another team and becomes a superstar? It happens so often, and we've seen it. Yeah, we've seen it time and time again. It just happens to be that for whatever reason, the environment is not conducive to getting the optimal performance from that individual. Doesn't mean necessarily that the club was wrong. It doesn't mean the individual was wrong, but it does mean the combination of the individual and the club was wrong.
Adam, would love to hear about how you got involved with Sweat, how you have helped contribute to its incredible growth, grow the community, all sorts of juicy questions. So first, how did you come across Sweat?
This is I love this story, right? So when my wife had our second child, and we had a gym in our house, or the back of the house, and our boy was only a month or two old, and she's like, I'm going to get back in shape. Fair enough, fine. So I think at that point, this is back in 2014, Googled personal trainer, and this young 17-year-old girl rocks up at our house 3 mornings a week with a couple of dumbbells out of the back of a hatchback and charges $35 an hour for three mornings a week, right? Well, the young lady was Kayla Ritzines.
No way.
Before Kayla Ritzines was Kayla Ritzines. And they worked out together in the gym for a bit close enough to a year, and Kayla's amazing. Then after about a year, they sort of, my wife went back to work and so on, so the workouts to that extent ended, but she stayed in contact with Kayla, but just irregularly, once every 6 months, 12 months, whatever. So anyway, fast forward, several years later, and this business called Sweat starts to, at that stage, with Bikini Body Guide and all those types of phrases, and Kayla starts to build this business with Toby, and I'd heard about the business, and I was at that point in time, I was looking around for another job, and I'd just left the global role and was doing a role here which I wasn't enjoying, so I was on the market pretty much just looking around. And we happened to be in Scotland, my wife and I, on holiday, because my wife's from Scotland, and I happen to have mentioned to her, look, I've heard of this company, Sweat. I don't know how big they are. I really don't want to go and work for a small, 4 people, 10 people in the back of someone's garage that's doing some coding, but do you know much about it? And she said, yeah, I know I know Kayla who's involved in it. I could ask her, because there's an operations role. She sent a text that night, got a text back within 30 seconds saying, tell Adam to have a chat when he gets back to Adelaide with Toby. So I did. I got home about 3 or 4 weeks later. They'd hired someone for the role. He was due to start about 10 days after I met with Toby. I had a chat with Toby for about an hour and a half, and they they took his letter off, withdrew that, and I landed the operations role at Sweat.
Wow.
And it was amazing business. I mean, at that stage, I think there was probably 30 or 40 employees.
Wow. So it already had a huge following.
It was already growing, right?
Okay.
I mean, that was, I think the Sweat brand had been around for about 2 years before that. So I've been there 6 of the 8 years that it's been around. And but what they were doing at that point was already incredibly exciting.
Yeah.
And, I think a lot of people work for companies off the basis of the purpose that the company has. And I'd argue that the purpose that we rock up with every day is pretty good. There's close to 100,000 workouts a day done on the app. So, it's 100,000 females around the world that are benefiting from our work and what we do, and hopefully making their health and well-being better than what it was. So on that basis, it was a bit of a no-brainer that the opportunity was great. I really enjoyed working with Toby as well. He was the CEO at that stage, so very gifted, really talented, very smart. So I learned an enormous amount from him in the areas that he was the expert, and I had full credit for the fact that at that stage he was like 25 or 26 or something, and was bringing on someone who's been around for a really long time into the business that he acknowledged he didn't understand finance, legal, data, compliance, HR, IT, or whatever. There's a whole raft of operational stuff back end that he was like, I'm not that interested in this. I don't think the value that I bring is in this area, but I acknowledge that I've got to get this sorted. The company's now starting to grow, and he batted really deep in software engineering and product design, brand marketing, these types of things. So he sort of went and did his thing, and I went and did my thing, and it worked really well.
It's an amazing level of self-awareness and humility for Toby.
Definitely.
Because there's so many, he was the CEO and a founder, and there's a lot of very successful founders who become CEOs who are excellent founders, but not really great CEOs, or refer to some of the things that CEOs do as either boring or uninteresting or annoying. But if you're a professional CEO, you've got to be good at those things.
Yeah.
Governance, finance, process, compliance, maintaining our reputation and our social license to operate, all those things that apparently appear boring. How did that conversation go? Toby's very capable as a person, but also could see that you were very capable. So it really comes down to trust. But there's a perception for a founder. There's a worry about, well, if I let it go and what if Adam turns out to be better at this than me? There's got to be a high level of trust and conversation there. Talk about how did that conversation evolve and a decision get arrived at? Because it's easy to sort of go afterwards, well, a decision was made and when we did it. But it wasn't that black and white, right?
No, and it takes time, right? Trust in any relationship is something that builds over time. And particularly with someone like Toby who is, thrives on high performance. The standards that he sets himself are off the chart, let alone the standards that he sets those that are around him. So, you've got to perform. It comes back to the same sort of thing we've been talking about before. If you wish to establish some credibility and trust, you can't just talk a good talk. You've got to perform. Like you've got to actually demonstrate value. And founders in particular, their threshold for people demonstrating value is like really high, right? I mean, they will critique individuals and turn over employees really quickly because they will just continue to push and push and push until you find people that will stand up under, the expectations of a founder or an entrepreneur, particularly one as gifted as what he is. And there were just numerous examples where, I felt like my involvement in solving problems that had been problems for him for a while helped us turn a corner with trust and credibility. And I'll give you an example. I mean, there was, for the first month or two, I sat in on every one-on-one that Toby had, and he had pretty much the entire business reporting to him. Right? So there's the first thing, right? I mean, when you've been around a long time, these things are red flags, right? Straight away. It's like you've gotten to where you are, but you are equally as to blame for the fact that you are the roadblock to anything progressing in this business. And when you sort of overlap with someone unbelievable intelligence, and you've got this somewhat junior team on the receiving end of these conversations, and I'd sit there in the one-on-ones like a tennis coach on the side watching it go backwards and forwards, and you've got, conversations that are at such a high level and at such pace and such terminology, and you've got a relatively junior employee that is nodding, wanting to come across as though I understand, not wanting to feel, in a way that they were not achieving or, and then they would leave the room and I'd say to Toby, I said, they have no idea what you just said. I said, let's be really clear, right? I mean, he said, but they're nodding, they've taken notes. He said, I've explained it. I said, yeah, no, that's not how communication works, right? Communication is not about just because you think you said something well that it's been well received. Communication is about how it's been received. And I'm telling you, they haven't received it. I said, we can test the theory, just get them back in a week and see what they've done. And sure enough, every time they've come back in a week later, stressed and overwhelmed because they really didn't comprehend. So I became very much the translator in that as an interface between someone that was, really clear on where they were going, knew how they wanted to get there, but a team that couldn't face into that and really understand it. So you've got to do two things. I mean, first of all, you need to be able to articulate your plan better. And I helped with that once I understood, and I'd ask the appropriate questions because I wasn't in any way intimidated by someone that was very smart. Like I said, I like listening, I like learning. So to me, it was just a great opportunity to challenge and debate and unpack where he was trying to go. And I'd push him on things. Well, what is your objective? I'm not sure you're clear on what goals or how you're going to measure the success. Like you'd really challenge him on that. And I think he really enjoyed it. Yeah. Someone was finally pushing back and sort of making him think at a different level. And at the same time, you've got to either upskill the employees you've got or find appropriate employees. And we did both.
So you're not afraid to push people, right?
To my detriment at times, Paul.
Sure. But it is that performance expectation, even if your performance expectation is at the time of your boss. If you were speaking to a somebody who said, I want to be a CEO one day, and they're working for a CEO, and the example you gave where they were nodding and taking notes and whatever, would young Adam Koch have sat there nodding and taking notes, or would have he have pushed and said, I actually need you to be clearer? What would you have?
Every boss that I've had, I've challenged.
Okay.
But you've got to be really careful, right? You've got to challenge in a very respectful manner. You've got to challenge coming from a position of, curiosity and with the right intent. This is not about objecting just for the sake of objecting, right? No one wants to work with someone that's just going to put hurdles or barriers in the road that are not required. But in order to achieve, if ultimately your objective is to achieve their objective, you've got to really understand what they want before you head out of the room, because very much in the same vein as one of those wind-up toys. I've used this analogy a lot, right? I mean, you can wind up a toy and put it on the table, but if it happens to be pointing slightly to the left, it's going to charge off at 1,000,000 miles an hour. It's going to work equally as hard. No one's doubting how hard or the effort or the hours or whatever else people get promoted on. They're going to determine success by whether the toy went in the right direction and ended up in the right spot, right? Well, the salt shaker. Yeah. So on that basis, let's get really clear on what it is you want first, because I'm not about to leave the room and waste hours of my time and be unproductive and come back to you with a solution that didn't meet the requirements or the tasks that you've given me. So I'm going to ask questions. And what you find more often than not is, the more questions you ask, very quickly you understand that there are areas where there are gaps in what it is that you're being tasked to achieve. And your job is to, understand those and get some clarity.
Just thinking about the acquisition that happened in 2022, was it? The first
Yeah, so I'm trying to think of the date. So I think it was 2021 now.
Oh, 2021.
Yeah.
And was that you were already the COO at that time, and was that, the acquisition exit strategy a big part of Toby's plan then, that you helped for that? Yeah.
Yeah, so when I first joined, I think part of the appeal for Toby at the time was that I came to the table with having worked in companies that had IPO'd, companies that had been through mergers, companies that had done acquisitions, both receiving and doing. So on that basis, I'd at least had some experience in all aspects of what he was trying to do. And initially we were going down the path of just capital raising and investment into the business. So we ventured down that path. We did a capital raise tour through the US, and we got well progressed in discussions with that, and it fell over at the last moment. So it was a bit disappointing for us to have gone through that process and not landed the outcome we wanted. But then, I think Toby also got to a point where his commercial mindset was very much around, I've got liquidity in the business, right? And I've built something which is pretty special. So at some point, I want to realise that liquidity. So then the task became, all right, well, let's look at a sale, right? Let's see what we can do. So then we went to the market and we were successful in getting a sale. And
then how was it? Was it about a couple of years later when Toby and Kayla repurchased their own business that they started?
Yeah.
What was your involvement?
I mean, that was an interesting journey, right? Because the basis for the original acquisition was pre-IPO from the parent company. So the intention at that point was to add a digital offer to what was a really compelling hardware offer from the parent company. And they're big business. And as far as the story goes, for an IPO, it just made great sense to bring someone to the table that had that level of expertise and battered deep in digital or online fitness app that was so successful. So on that basis, that's how it started. Now the IPO window closed as a direct result of the ending of the pandemic, really, because home hardware was going through the roof because gyms were closed. And then vaccinations happened and so on and so forth. Gyms started to open. Well, guess what? Home hardware sales went down. People got back into the gym, which meant that the window for the valuation of the business that was going to IPO sort of closed. Now, when that happens, as we would all know, that creates a rather large capital gap in your plan, right? When you're going to the market for capital investment from the public. So very quickly things changed from that date, and through no one's fault. It was just a changing in the circumstance of the global markets. But on the receiving end, of course, we were no longer probably part of the plan, to be completely honest. We're trying to integrate into a business that was needing to completely restructure and reposition itself meant that we probably weren't going to be part of the plan. So, look, I started having discussions with them early last year about that and sort of opened the door to a conversation as to whether they would consider perhaps just having a think about handing the company back. That took us a few months, and then having discussions with Toby and Kayla around the same thing. It's like, how do you feel about having the business back? So, we got there in, what was it, November last year. The company came back to both of them, which, I'm beyond pleased, only because I do trust both of them enormously. Their heart and soul and passion for the business is unquestionable. And, they know the business well, which means that I don't find myself in a position where I'm trying to explain it to third parties that perhaps don't get it. And I've got the full backing and support of both of them. So I feel like we're in a really strong position now.
Dream team back together.
Yeah, it's good.
Can I loop back to your so as a CEO in talking about IPOs and all of the technical things that happen when you're moving a company through selling, acquisition, exiting, growing, getting capital, all of those different things. There's a point at which it's clear that some people can manage those processes and become those people. It's almost a benevolent level, right? Where it's not about you. Everything you're doing is about the betterment of the company and achieving a great outcome. That's a real shift in mindset when you become a chief, whether it's a chief anything, but a chief any role in an organisation. And now that you've been, I've been a CEO for a very, very long time, so not just a long time, but one of the things that I've found in coaching and trying to develop leaders behind me, succession plan behind me, and you would be doing the same with Sweat. You know that you're going to be a really successful CEO if you've got people pushing. You've got Adams who are questioning you and demanding performance from you. It keeps you on your toes. But often do you find that you get these senior managers who've pushed and pushed and pushed till they become the top manager. Now they want to be the chief operating officer. They want to be the chief executive officer. But all of the skills and traits that got them there now are failing them going forward. They suddenly, all of the things where they've pushed people hard now doesn't work. I must admit that I didn't notice that transition for myself. I just sort of found that it came naturally to me. And it sounds like it came naturally to you. But equally, because I like people, I watch some really ambitious young managers they just crash into this wall of they can't get into the C level, and or if they do, they suddenly really don't perform. Have you seen that happen, and what do you think is going on for them?
Well, I think that the constant there is change, right? And businesses change, positions change, the industry changes, the objectives of the business change. If you've gotten to where you are and you think that, and it's the classic what got you here won't get you there. If you've gotten to a particular point and you believe that just the continuation of the same behaviours is going to stand you in good stead, you're fooling yourself, right? Because the entire environment's changed. Even if your title changed or your remit changed or the budget changed, everything changes. And if you don't have that ability, first of all, to acknowledge the change, be aware of the change, and again, I've got a lot of favourite sayings, but probably my biggest favourite saying is, the first step in any process is awareness, right? And if you don't have that level of awareness, people just don't change. And I've seen, and I won't reference names, but I've seen some unbelievably impressive CVs, way more impressive than my own or yours, just crazy companies. And you look at that and you go, wow, and we've hired some. Mm-hmm. And then you realise that when you bring them in, that they come in with a very fixed mindset about this is what I've done, this is what I do, take it or leave it. It's like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's going to work.
For you.
That's right. Because particularly if you're creating a culture across an SLT or an exec or a C-suite, if you're what you're trying to drive in the business is some core values around things like creating a safe space, fear of consequence. You can speak freely. Every opinion is respected and valued. So on and so forth. Collaborative in nature. Everybody gets. So if you're attempting to create that around the table, and you have someone at the table that is not demonstrating those things, it's just not going to work, right? So it really does then come down to, your first step is to have an open and honest conversation and say, hey, that meeting this afternoon didn't go well off the back of the fact that your comment was, pretty inflexible, pretty direct, and quite frankly, like shut down 3 other people in the room. This is not going to work for us. Now,
isn't that the moment right there that separates the leader from the manager? Is that the instant pull up, not in front of everybody, but afterwards, and the straight talk of that didn't go well. What could you have done to have done that better?
Absolutely.
And in that moment, their decision as to how to accept that feedback and respond to that feedback, isn't that like, that's the moment where people get the chance to become a leader or stay where they are.
Yeah. And like I said, if you have that ability to adapt to change and recognise and have a conversation, because they might have a different view, that's fine. Or they might have, their intention could have been, fine, but it came out the wrong way, whatever it might be. But I've had managers that, have been, I'd refer to as probably junior, mid-level managers that have had those conversations on several occasions with me throughout the years, and every single time, at every opportunity, they take that as an opportunity to learn, and they rock up next time and they just get better and better and better and better, and you watch them evolve over time, and they've turned it, they're in great roles. They've got that capability, but inflexibility in any leadership role is a recipe for disaster, right? You've got to be able to adapt.
Yeah, and one of my favourite sayings is, I think it was Jack Welch that said, if you don't like change, you'll like redundancy less.
That's right.
But one of the things that in recent years has been this gentleness of language, teaching kids that they don't lose, and everyone wins a prize, and all of that sort of thing. But what you're talking about there, and from a leadership point of view, is having straight conversations about performance. Your performance wasn't up to scratch. It might just be me. I'm sure you haven't seen it, but it might just be me who's noticed it, that this increasing level of people being aggrieved by that conversation. How dare you question my performance? I'm feeling very stressed about that. In fact, I can feel a sickness coming on as a result of this conversation. But is it becoming more difficult to have straight conversations with people and for them to respond positively? Are you seeing more people who are perhaps more fragile or less resilient and leaving jobs, or even worse still, quitting but not leaving the job? Or is that a phenomenon you're seeing, or has that always been the case?
I think it's always been the case. I think that if you go back to the early stages of your career, you will remember multiple instances of people you were surrounded by that were underperforming.
Yeah.
The difference being is, did you have the conversation or not? Were you at that, did you have the confidence at that point to sit down and have that conversation? Probably not. So, what you walk past, you accept and condone, but it doesn't mean that it's probably more or less prevalent necessarily. But now I think that, like I said, when you get to a certain age or a certain level of experience, you choose not to walk past it because you've seen the implications and the consequences of walking past it. Management by avoidance doesn't work, right? It festers and it gets bigger and becomes a bigger problem. And when you've experienced the impact of that problem when it gets bigger, you commit to yourself, I'm not letting that happen again. I saw the red flags 3 months ago, 6 months ago, and I chose not to address it at the time, and now I'm dealing with a way bigger issue. Separate issues socially. Do I agree with the fact that the world has created spaces for particularly our children where they can advocate responsibility or rewarded for just showing up? I don't agree with that at all. I think that we're setting up children for failure.
Definitely.
We're not creating a resilient generation that's coming through. And on that basis, I think that our children are going to really struggle for those that are believe or are bought into that's the way it should be done, because the onus of responsibility or burden of responsibility has been shifted away from the person that is actually responsible. I saw an article in the Advertiser a year or two ago that said that they're about to mandate not putting chocolates on the counter so that the child doesn't come to the counter and be faced with the fact that there's chocolates in front of them.
Yeah, rather than saying, just regulate.
Yeah,
or no.
Just say no. Right? It's like, no. The burden of responsibility has become on the retailer to remove the chocolate so they don't have to make that decision. Well, I mean, how does that benefit anyone?
So, Adam, I think just to wrap it up shortly, but what is next for Sweat, and how? I'm really, really curious to know, because you sound like you're just the king of processes. So how are you involving AI into make your process even more better?
Yeah, I think we're all searching around in the dark at the moment, bumping into various things without a flashlight, right? Yeah. So the pace of change at the moment is so dynamic. You've got to be careful, I think, with hitching your trailer to something just yet. I think what you do want to understand, first of all, is you really need to be clear on where are the areas of high value, and I think this is going to become the debate. I don't think that AI is necessarily going to replace roles in most businesses. There's some roles that it will take, but most roles will still continue to be there. But what will end up happening is there's a component of everyone's role where part of the process is completely transactional or administrative. And I think that's what it's going to do. It's going to remove the stuff that is lower value and allow people to focus on the higher value items. I think it's going to be roles that are around in a year, 2 years or 3 years' time that don't exist at the moment. And I think they are roles like script engineering or prompt engineering or whatever it might be, where you've got an SME. So, for example, in our world, in the production space, you still need a person that understands productions, right? The specifications of the lighting or the ambience or the background or the contrast or the colour palette or whatever, they still need to have that expertise. AI is not going to give them that. Now, you can key it into a machine that gets you to do everything, but someone needs to key it in. And that's what I mean about a script or a prompt writer. I think that your ability, and I won't use the terminology, but if you put something bad into something, you get something bad out, right? So you put something good in, but you're going to need SMEs to put that in, because you just can't, a computer's not going to make that decision for you. So I think that's, tread with caution at the moment.
Yeah.
You think it would be less about roles becoming redundant, but certain people's approaches will become redundant. So again, if you can see in an AI world, if you're leaning into AI as a way of getting rid of low value tasks, we're approaching a period in history where for the first time humans may not be the most intelligent being on the planet. It may be that. However, the opportunity is for, and humans necessarily have done this throughout history, is we evolve even faster. It's those skills that have led you to be successful, those human skills. AI can do process, but AI can't do good humaning. And the better leaders, the more successful leaders, are the ones who are curious about people. They care about people and they engage with people. Are they the skills that you think that we should be really focusing on teaching our kids is how to be better humans, critical thinkers, decision makers, communicators, where communication is, like you said, it's not about fluffy social media communication. It's actually about your performance really wasn't that great that time.
Yeah. So I think there's I refer to this as the pendulum that swings, right? And the pendulum starts over in a position and then it swings potentially too far one way and then it comes back the other way and then it corrects itself over time. I think this is what's going to happen. I think that people get excited by the shiny thing in the room. Doesn't mean it's not a benefit. That's not what I'm saying. But the pendulum swings so far that it's going to be the solution of all things and solve all problems, and that's just not the reality, because you're still going to have that reliance, which is what you're saying, which is just a repositioning of the value that you bring to the table might be different in 5 years than what it is now, but you will still have that reliance. If I use the Sweat example, we're grounded in authenticity. The reason why the Sweat app, and everyone says, what's the secret sauce, right? because there's that many digital fitness. You can download free digital fitness as much as you need. So why are people paying, in the numbers they are for our content? It's not just the content. The provision of product and service is it's a commodity. It's transactional, right? Anyone can do it. But what's the layer below that engages a global female community to feel like they are connected as part of a tribe? Now, I know people use the word community and throw it around, but I would argue that Sweat does community better than most businesses. And I've challenged people to name businesses that do it better. We have arguably the most loyal, passionate, committed, vocal, female fitness community in the world. And that's off the back of authenticity. Now, if you attempt to play with that or mess with that by bringing in what is potentially perceived as inauthentic content, inauthentic messaging, inauthentic branding, or whatever, be careful, right? Because the consumers are not that silly. They will read through it. And if someone's going to subscribe to a robot, that might be 50 years. I'm not sure about that. It's too far away for me to think about. But for where we are right now, that transition needs to be handled with care. Are we about to swap out trainers who have got massive followings, massive reaches, huge authenticity, connection with their community, great messaging with pure AI? No.
We could go on for hours about our favourite subject, which is about managing and leading things. I want to thank you for your time, and I want to just ask we've been talking about some pretty heavy topics, so I want to ask you about some interesting ones now as we wrap up. Adam Koch, who's a professional CEO, your 3 favourite movies.
Oh, yeah. It's interesting because, Pulp Fiction, I think I'm a big fan of I think the other one.
Tarantino fan.
Love Tarantino, right?
Yeah.
Just quirky.
Yeah.
Love the quirkiness of it. I think the Blues Brothers is just a classic. I always show my age. And for whatever reason, I really enjoyed Last of the Mohicans as well. It was a really powerful film.
So you've been a DJ as well. So you've got there's pretty much no music that is off limits for you. But if I put you under pressure and said, okay, your three songs that no matter how many times you've heard them, makes you smile like you are now. What are the 3 songs?
Almost. I go back to my childhood, right? I think music has that unbelievable ability to connect you back to a feeling or a thought or a place. So things like AC/DC, Thunderstruck, and Guns N' Roses, Sweet Child of Mine. Neil Diamond. I used to play darts with mum and dad when I was 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and that's what they'd play. So it takes you back to those experiences. So those types of things from that era for me was just really exciting.
Yeah.
And a final question, what would 16-year-old Adam Koch give as advice to professional CEO, dad, old Adam Koch now?
I think about this a lot because I think as a child, you have no limitations when it comes to what's just fun, right? And I think that any child would probably say to their parents, lighten up, take it easy, enjoy yourself, have fun, because that's what children enjoy. That's what they get out of bed for, right? Is they just bowl into the day and want to have fun. And I think that as you go through life and you create more responsibilities for yourself and more pressure and more stress and whatever levels of anxiety, thinking about all the problems you've got in the future, I think the younger version would turn around and say, you need to not take yourself quite so seriously.
Nice. Excellent. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you so much. It was, I feel, oh my goodness, I feel so grateful to be here. I feel I didn't ask many questions, but I'm just really amazed.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a chat. It's wonderful.
Good on you.